Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome to this month's Positive Parenting Practices webinar. Our topic today is engaging your kids in difficult conversations. And we are pleased to have you join us and hope you will consider joining us for future conversations as we work to make this event a monthly free opportunity for parents. I'm Rachel Segovia, the director of Lee Summit Cares. We are a nonprofit organization that seeks to mobilize community partners to develop a culture of physical and mental wellness for Lee Summit youth and families that inspires positive, healthy choices. You can learn more at our website, lscares.org. I'm joined today by parent facilitator and longtime Love and Logic teacher, Carrie Gray. Carrie is a licensed family and marriage therapist with Rediscover Mental Health and has spent the past several months in partnership with Lee Summit Cares, helping Lee Summit parents respond to the COVID-19 crisis within their families. Today's free parenting resource is made possible through our event sponsor, Jason Langston of Farmers Insurance. Jason is a member of Lee Summit Care's Business of Character sector, which supports youth character development within both the community as well as within the schools. Now I'm pleased to invite Jason to share a little bit about his business before we begin today's program.
Awesome, thank you. So I'm Jason Langston with Farmers Insurance here in downtown Lee Summit. We're a community insurance agency serving the Kansas City Metro, and we love our community here in Lee Summit. We love supporting local community groups that affect change and support our residents, and partnering with Lee Summit Cares is just a perfect natural fit for us. And anything we can do to help them, we love to do. So we're an insurance agency that provides solutions for families and businesses that range the whole spectrum. And just because we're here locally doesn't necessarily mean you pay more for what you get than an online insurance company. So we have people that come to us without insurance all the way to people that have been insured for 50 years with lots of cars and houses and boats and toys and all kinds of stuff. So we can help lots of different people. And we have a special offer to supporters of Lee Summit Cares called Quotes for a Cause, and we'll donate $20 for every household that comes to us for a quote. No obligation, just to see if we can help you, and if we can't, we'll tell you. But it's something that you can do. You can share with friends and family, coworkers, and those folks can also get a donation made in their name to Lee Summit Cares. All you have to do is text 524-3756 LS Cares, and we'll shoot you back a link, and you can click on that or share that as well, and get a quote, and we'll make a $20 donation. So that's another way we hope to support Lee Summit Cares. So excited about this learning that's going to happen today in parenting. So I'm a parent of 3 myself, so I'm excited to hear about it.
Thanks so much, Jason.
Sure.
Oh, we'll move into Carrie's portion.
Yep, so now I'm gonna hijack the screen back. And so thank you for your patience, and thank you, Jason, for your support of Lee Summit Cares, and Rachel for your introductions. As Rachel mentioned earlier, today's topic for discussion is how to talk to your kids about difficult topics. And so specifically, we're going to be diving into these 5 different areas. First, why straightforward, honest communication is the best practice. We're also going to help you prepare for the conversation, which will keep in mind the age of your child and how much information to share, what information to share. We'll also look at key considerations for having the conversation, and what if your kid is really struggling with a specific situation, some of the different signs that maybe some additional support is needed. And so you'll get some ideas on what to look for there, and also certainly looking at some places that you can go to get help. So I want to start today by sharing this diagram with you, it is a Mott poll, which came from the University of Michigan. And this particular poll was done back in 2018. And so I mentioned that because I think that if we're looking at the top health issues concerning parents today, I would imagine that COVID-19 would be at the very top of this list. But you can see that we all, as parents, have concerns about our kids' health and well-being. And so there's conversations that it's important that we have with them, because as parents, we have the most influence on our kids. And even when we think they're not listening, they are listening. And so today we're going to dive into how to do that. Now, this is a picture, a close picture of a betta fish that was purchased for my oldest daughter, who is 25 years old, back when she was a kid. So to give you a connection to our topic on difficult situations, it's very natural when bad things happen for parents to want to shelter and protect their children from the pain, from the discomfort. And so how this translated in our own home with our first of 4 children was Blueberry passed away. And while I was in her room after she left for school, I noticed this and gave my husband a frantic phone call that betta fish had died. This is her best friend. She really loves her betta. She saved money to buy her betta. We need to get a new betta before she gets home, right? And so that story went on to include the longest living betta fish, which I believe survived for 3 years. And at which point she understood that that was not possible. And we had to tell her that we had replaced Blueberry 4 times, in fact, during that time period. And so it is natural to want to shelter our kids, to protect those kids, but the reality is that that's not sustainable. The reality is, we know, is that pain, while it has many celebrations and exciting transitions and happenings, we also know that pain and suffering do happen, and that we, as a parent, are better served to help guide our kids through dealing with those challenging situations, through loss, through uncertainty, so that we can better prepare them for life in the real world. But also, by having those conversations, it helps them to lower their own anxiety levels and have that relationship connection where they know they can come to us to talk about it. So Blueberry, the betta fish, was kind of a big deal in our family. But putting things in perspective, obviously there's a lot of other things that happen that are bigger, weighted, heavier issues. And so, obviously talking about COVID and talking about that pandemic and what that's going to look like when kids, those who are going back to school or working, going to do school online. We know in the news there's been information on incidents of hate crimes. We know there's racism. We know it could be a divorce, death of a loved one. Moving can be a stressful, difficult issue for kids. And so regardless of what that topic is, today you're going to get information on how to best address those conversations given the age of your child. And so I'm also going to be giving you some examples of what that conversation may sound like, and so that you can go back and look at that as a template for creating your own communication plan. So let's start here. This is typical parent response, the deer in the headlight response when things happen. And oftentimes when big things happen in our world, it's overwhelming because we're not sure necessarily how to have that discussion with our kids, how much information is appropriate to share. We might be fearful that we're not going to do it right, if you will. But the positive news is that you do not have to be a PhD child psychologist to be an excellent parent and to be able to have those conversations with your kids. And so the important thing is to essentially just do it. And so here are some of the reasons why, as we jump in and talk about how. We'll finish with our summary of why. So first off, difficult conversations are a part of life, as we talked about earlier. And so avoiding the problem or that situation only creates more stress and anxiety for everyone. And like I said earlier, it's not sustainable. The second reason is that when we discuss difficult subjects with our children in age-appropriate language, we decrease their anxiety and we help our child to feel safe and secure. Also, as they get older, they will be exposed to more things. And we want to start as early as possible in building our relationship by creating a safe space for our child to listen and ask questions and ultimately make sense of the world. And through this process, as they grow into young adults themselves, we can also help them to develop critical thinking skills. We can also share our values and perspectives on things and give them room to ask questions and think through their own perspective on things. And so many reasons why it's important just to dive in and have direct and honest conversations. But how do we do that? Well, it's always a good idea to have some plan when we go into the conversation. The first is just to have realistic expectations. It's okay if you feel uncomfortable and if you stumble on your words. We are not looking for perfect, we're just looking for a discussion with our child. One of the other things that we also need to keep in mind is to address our own feelings first. And so it could be a situation where maybe you have really strong feelings about this, and that's okay. You know, you might be feeling sad, angry, whatever yourself, and all feelings are important and need to be acknowledged, but it's important that you discuss your feeling in response to that situation, because our kids will pick up on that emotional tone as we're having that conversation. So let's just label what it is for what it is. Another thing when you're planning is to pick a good time and a safe place for the conversation. We also want to be truthful, so we don't want to make anything up, but it's also easiest just to stick to the facts rather than getting into hypotheticals or creating assumptions about what's happening. Finally, it's important to be mindful of the child's age when deciding how to and how much information to share. And with all of our children, regardless of their age, we need to provide reassurance so that they know that they're safe. You're creating a safe place for them to talk, and things are going to be okay in spite of how difficult or how uncertain a situation is. So let's start first by looking at how you might apply this conversation template to a child who's 2 to 6 years old. The first thing that we need to keep in mind is that young children are very literal thinkers. And an example of this is when my youngest was 4 years old, one of her older sisters wanted to get her to come inside at night because she wanted to go inside. And so she told her younger sister, Sammy, as soon as the sun goes down, the wolves come out. And Sammy remarked recently that she believed that for the longest time after her sister had said that to her. And so keep that literal thinking piece in mind as you share information. They also have a very limited life experience. And so the younger kids are going to be influenced most by their parent reaction, immediate family members, and people who are essentially in their smaller bubble, if you will. So how do we address it with these younger kids? Number one would be to limit the exposure to the news. All right. Another example of that is when the World Trade Centers, collapsed. We had our TV on a lot back then. And at that time, our kids were between 2 and 6 years of age. And they were asking how many towers got hit? How did this happen again? And so there was a lot of questions along those lines. Another thing to consider is to ask them, what do you already know? So maybe they've heard something or they have some ideas in their head. And so we want to seek to understand, where are they coming from? And they probably don't know a whole lot. Also, as I mentioned earlier, it's important to acknowledge your feelings and as well as their feelings. They may have some fears as well. We want to break down the issue to the simplest form and of course, provide reassurance. So this is how this conversation might look like if we have the news on. And again, here's a heavy weighted topic. And so a mass shooting has happened and it came on the news. Your child is aware of that. And so instead of turning off the TV and saying, oh, never mind, it's nothing you need to be worried about, which is only going to increase perhaps their interest, 2-year-old, maybe not. But basically we want to keep it in simple terms. So we'd start with simple facts. A man shot people. I'm feeling sad and angry about it, but the police caught the man and you are safe and I will keep you safe. All right. So just nice, simple, straightforward, honest terms. Now, as children get older, their exposure to news and to media and different things online grows. They're more likely to encounter inappropriate content. They're reading, they're writing now, but they don't really, as the younger edge of this age range, is not real good at discerning the difference between reality and fantasy. And so they might see things that they think are real, but are not necessarily real. And so it's always a good idea to step in with them and talk about similar questions. The first thing we want to do, though, is to be aware of what our kids are being exposed to. And a lot of that means where are they going online? Because many of them spend a great deal of time online, whether it's playing video games. TikTok is a really popular app for kids this age. Instagram, Snapchat, what are the things that they're seeing? How are they using these platforms? Then something comes up, we would want to ask them that same question about what do you already know? What have you heard? What are the kids at school saying? And then we want to share facts in simple terms, but we're going to broaden it a little bit by providing some context from which the situation occurred. We're going to start to encourage that critical thinking through open-ended questions. And so if we want them to become thinkers, we're going to ask questions rather than just tell them straightforward. Another thing is I always like to encourage my kids as they start to grow up through this age is to look for the heroes and the helpers in the situations. There's that reassurance is there and it shows a certain character type that we always wanted to, embrace within our own families. When difficult things happen, how can you help? How can we be a helper to those people? So if we apply this to our next scenario, so our application here for our 7 to 12-year-olds would be COVID-19 and reopening, which might involve, obviously will involve schools, et cetera, over time. And so we're going to start here with things are starting to reopen, but it isn't business as usual. What are your thoughts on having to wear a mask when in public places? How do you think your friends will respond? And so it's a great idea to pause with these questions and take times to listen to your kids, your tweens, younger kids' perspective on that. Then we can insert our own values and how we're going to guide them by saying, I will wear a mask because the authorities have asked me to, and I want to protect others. And here's my expectation is that you will do the same. Next, we can get them thinking, again, as they're becoming more independent and away from you more, we want to ask them, what will you do if you are with a friend who takes off their masks or refuses to wear one? And so we can help guide our kid through that situation to make sure that, in this example, they continue to be safe. All right. And so that's another example of how to apply that model to that conversation. And so the last one that we're going to talk about is age considerations for teens and young adults. I have many young adults. My kids are young adults now, and I have one teenager. And it's important to keep in mind with teenagers in particular is that they're more interested really in what their friends have to say rather than what their parents have to say. Now, that doesn't mean that the parent voice is not important. The parent voice continues to be important, but we need to realize that they are looking at their peers to get a sense of how others are reaction and what they think and feel about different situations. The other thing that's important is that our teenagers, well, no one, but teenagers in particular do not want to be lectured. They do not want to be told that they're thinking wrong or how they should be thinking. And so in order to stay out of a power struggle in that area, it's important to ask questions and to stay away from lectures. And so as we jump back onto the slide here, we need to keep in mind that our teenagers have a very high exposure to media, to news information. They're also engaging and posting on social media platforms. And so it's important to have conversations about them or with them about their social media profile, if you will, how they want other people to view them, what is appropriate to post, and when is it a good time not to post something, types of information, etc. We want to encourage open dialogue. We may not agree on everything, but the idea is that we want to know what you're thinking. I might not see it differently as an adult, but I really do want to understand what you're thinking about the situation. That will help me to understand you better. It's important to admit when you don't know something. And then together we can say, well, where can we go to get that information where we know the information is trustworthy? Also sharing our personal values and letting them know here's where I stand on the issue and why. So that's where I'm coming from. And then finally, asking more questions and engaging our older kids in that critical thinking process by saying, what would you do in this difficult situation? Because we want to keep in mind that this generation is a generation that's going to make things happen. And so we want to empower them. And so if we were to apply this to another scenario that's been in the news, the application here is a hate crime. So we stick to the facts in a straightforward, honest way. 2 white men shot a black man. Some people believe that white men are better than black men and use this to justify their behavior. Why do you think people act in this way? What needs to change to stop racism? Who do you notice making a difference? And what can you do to make a difference? Those are all questions and discussion points that will help draw out your child's perspective so that you can engage in a meaningful conversation and ask questions that will help your teen maybe to consider different perspectives, as well as for you to get a better understanding of their thinking perspectives. And so do keep in mind that the brain is not fully developed until at least 25 years of age. And so even if you have a child who is totally physically developed, they look like an adult, do keep in mind that they do not think like adults. And so that is why another reason why it's very critical to create that safe space for your kids to talk to you and bounce ideas off of you, where they know they're not going to be judged or lectured or told what to think. We want to keep that relationship strong, you know, through this time and all times, of course. And so finally, you know, to wrap up, what if additional support is needed? And we all know, you know, having 4 children myself, that some kids are highly sensitive to events taking place around them. And so if you are noticing changes in behavior that last more than 2 to 4 weeks, it is a good idea to consult with a professional. And I often will encourage parents to check in first with the child's pediatrician or practitioner. And so that's a good place to go. But the types of changes in behavior that I'm referring to might be a child who's excessively worrying or fearful about things, needing a lot of reassurance. Maybe they're not sleeping well, their eating habits have changed. You might see angry emotional outbursts. Younger kids might have tantrums. You know, these are all things that could indicate that the child or teen is not coping very well. Some of these can also just be normal things that could happen, especially with a teenager as they're going through development. Another one to keep in mind is that if a child starts to isolate and they don't seem to be very motivated to engage in things that they had previously enjoyed. And so, as I mentioned earlier, a pediatrician is a great place to start. You could also consult your insurance for providers. And if you're just need someone to help you get this whole conversation going and point you in different directions, I encourage you to call First Step to Help, which is a 24-hour crisis hotline. And so the number is there for that. And so that's all the information that I have for you on the topic of talking to your kids about difficult subjects. And so I hope you will join in for future conversations in August.
Thanks, Carrie. And thank you to everyone who joined us. And I just wanted to give a few reminders. Save the date for our upcoming webinar, Back to School Success, which will be held on August 18th at 4 p.m. Carrie will be discussing back to school anxiety, maintaining student motivation regardless of the learning platform, and how parents can help their child succeed in school. You can pre-register for this course at lscares.org. And as a reminder, you can access all of our past webinars, including today's, on that same website, lscares.org. Tomorrow, you will receive a survey from me via email. I ask that you take 2 minutes of your time to fill it out so we know how we can make improvements to these webinars in the future. And finally, if you enjoyed today's webinar and would like to support our ongoing efforts to provide free resources for parents in our community, consider making a donation at lscares.org. Your support helps us to continue to provide high quality, responsive educational opportunities for parents and their children. Thank you again for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you in August. Bye.
Goodbye. All right, that was under 30 minutes, Rachel.
Wait, let me end the recording.
Oh, shoot.
My mouth there.